Hello again, this is Dolores Cannon with the Metaphysical Hour. And I just want to tell you, I was out of town last week, but I was in New Mexico, and it was really a very rare opportunity. I was giving my hypnosis class at the college in New Mexico. It was just outside of Santa Fe. It's the northern New Mexico college up at El Rito. That was their campus that they had outside of Santa Fe. And I thought it was a great honor for them to ask me to come and teach, because everyone who took that class got 1.5 college credits for the 3-day class. And I think that's really wonderful. And, you know, I've told you before when I was going on, this is the only college in the United States that is giving a 4-year course in natural medicine and alternative healing. And I think it's fantastic that they're doing that. Anyone who takes the 4-year course will have a BS, a Bachelor of Science. And they've asked me to be with them. They are giving courses in aromatherapy, homeopathy, acupuncture, all kinds of natural healing. And we had about 40 people in the class, and I thought it was fantastic. And they asked me to come back again next semester. The only thing I didn't like was the altitude. Me and altitude just don't get along. It was almost 8,000 feet where we had to go, and it took several days to get used to that. And then it's very dry because it's out in the desert. But still, it was a fantastic weekend, and I did get to do the course. And anybody who is interested in my courses, my classes that I give, you can go on my website and find out where the next ones are going to be. Next weekend, I'll be doing one in Atlanta, and I'll be doing a book signing there at the Phoenix and Dragon bookstore. So if you go on my website, you can find all these things out. I've got 3 classes in May. The other one will be in New Jersey, in Newark, and then out to San Jose. But my website is www.ozarkmountain, that's OZARKMT.com. Or for those people out of the country, it's OZARKMT.com. All right, now I've got a guest tonight, and he's one of the authors we have published, and his book is doing very well, so I want to let everybody get to know about him. The author is Don Schorn, and he has written the books called The Elder Gods of Antiquity, and it's part of a 3-volume set that I just got through proofreading the second volume, so it looks like we're probably going to be having an ongoing series from this man. He has done a tremendous amount of research, and I really respect that because I love research. I love it when somebody does their homework. But Don is going to be on tonight. He's going to talk about his book and talk about himself. You're there, aren't you, Don?
I sure am. Hi, Dolores. And thank you so much for inviting me to your program.
Okay. I think the book's only been out really a few months. We published it this year, didn't we?
It started in early January. Mm-hmm.
So it's been at the bookstores, and it's doing very well. But Don, I would like to start out by letting people know about you. Tell me about your background and how you got into all of this.
Well, I am a graduate mechanical engineer, and I was very candidly, I was browsing one day in a bookstore and read a back cover blurb that indicated ancient texts proved the existence of ancient astronauts visiting Earth in our distant past. And the word proof really hit me strongly. So I wanted to very candidly find out for myself, and it started really as a lark. I started doing some research, and the research, very candidly, Dolores, seemed to get out of control. It was such an interesting journey that I embarked upon that it just fed upon itself. And 9 years later, I had no intent at the start, at the onset of little quirk to ever write a book, or let alone a trilogy about the topic of ancient astronauts. But once I did get into the material and the wealth of information, finding that there are many, many inconsistencies and flaws with our current theories, it became self-perpetuating, and ended up writing a book.
So it turned out it wasn't a lark after all. It became a career, really.
It very much so. I had planned after my early retirement, Dolores, to start a second career in writing, but at that particular time, very candidly, it was August of 1996 when this happened. I had not picked out a particular topic, to pursue in the writing. So, and at the onset, it did not appear as though the ancient texts, the ancient history of Earth, early human development, and so forth would be that topic. But like I said, the more I got into the research, the more it captured me, and it became phenomenally interesting and surprising to me how much really we don't know about our ancient past.
I know, because as a writer myself, you get into a topic you really love and you can get absorbed in. That's the wonderful part, of being a writer. And I love research too, and I've written about the same topic, but we're coming to the same conclusions, but we come from different directions. And you have gotten yours from your research, haven't you?
I have. As a matter of fact, I was also surprised, pleasantly surprised, Dolores, when we talked in 2006, and we started comparing notes, and from an entirely different perspective, from entirely different sources, we seem to come up with virtually a very, very compatible history of Earth's ancient past, and extremely similar conclusions.
Uh-huh. Well, that's what I always like it when somebody says, well, where's your proof? Well, I said, now we can go to your books for the proof. But the first book, The Elder Gods of Antiquity, that mostly deals with artifacts and things like that, isn't it? That you go way back to prove that they have been here before?
It does, Dolores. Again, it's not really proof. But it is suggestive evidence. I tend, as an engineer, I tend to be a little bit of a skeptic by nature, and hence I prefer to very, very deeply analyze a topic before coming to any conclusion. So I choose not to make fantastic claims, and especially with dealing with the ancient past or extraterrestrial beings, UFOs, things of that fact or that nature. Only facts, are offered that are then accompanied by my personal conclusions that are suggestive of the extraterrestrial visitations that I write about.
Well, see, that's what I've noticed in the first book especially. You find a lot of things that people just don't know about. But, the history of Earth is not at all the way they say it is, and I've always believed that. But like Eric von Däniken, he used to find anomalies too. But it's the idea that you have found things that the average person doesn't know about, and I've never seen in any other book. So, you want to tell us about some of those things?
Well, I would be happy to, Dolores.
Go ahead. We can whet the audience's appetite. Okay.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Let me start off with kind of some nebulous concepts, and then I'll get into some hard artifacts that we'll tie together at the end. The nebulous aspect kind of ends up being, again, coming from the review of Earth's Ancient Record, specifically, let me give a little background, Dolores. The first dinosaur bone was found in the early 1800s, and it consisted only of a single fossil. Additional bones were, discovered over the ensuing years, but the first skeletal reconstruction occurred much later. Prior to that time, modern man would not have known how the many different dinosaur species would have looked. However, there are enigmatic illustrations that vastly predate our first knowledge of these terrible lizards, and were drawn in ancient times. And they accurately show the various different species of dinosaurs that supposedly became extinct 65 million years ago. In prehistoric time, I'm sorry, Dolores, go ahead.
I know that's interesting that some of these drawings were found in caves where people keep saying dinosaurs and humans didn't exist at the same time. But a human had to have drawn them in the caves.
That is precisely correct, Dolores. We find not only in caves, but on rock faces, in canyons, and so forth. And they're found really around the world. It's not, concentrated in any one area. It seems to be, again, throughout the world. We have canyon carvings in Arizona that depict a human about to be attacked by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then we have a Rhodesian Bushman drawing of a cave painting of a brontosaurus. And that dates back to sometime between 30,000 and 15,000 BC.
Wow.
And you were speaking of more direct ties with humans, period, over and above the drawings. A related oddity in Texas found fossilized human footprints along with dinosaur prints within the same strata layer.
Yes, I talked to a man who lived down there, and he said there's a museum that I think is built around one of those so people can see it.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And again, the same type of thing has happened, in southwestern Asia in 1983. The fossilized human footprint was found next to a print of a three-toed dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
So reports of the hominoid, again, it's pretty hard to say for certain it was a true human. Let alone a modern type human, but reports of humanoid footprints with dinosaur prints in the same strata are somewhat common. You're not going to find them everywhere, but it's not the rarity that it would appear. But together, they may have explanations other than the coexistence of the two species. However, that possibility should not be excluded when visitation by extraterrestrial human-like beings are considered. So, it's anyone's guess, but one thing I do want to point out while we're on the dinosaurs and footprints and, the tie-in with humans, strata layers can become mixed due to, tectonic plate movements, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and so forth. But they don't become mixed by tens of millions of years. So if dinosaurs did indeed die out 65 million years ago, regardless of the amount of tectonic plate movement, you're not going to mix later humanoid footprints with dinosaur prints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we don't know if it's extraterrestrial or if it's, what it is, but it's definitely...
Exactly. It certainly continues to remain a mystery, but like I said, the actual coexistence of a humanoid being with dinosaurs can't be eliminated if you consider extraterrestrial visitors.
Yeah. Okay,
no,
so you said you were going to go on then with another...
just going to say that besides the more nebulous oddities and mysteries that we have in our past, we have hard evidence, and these are called anomalous artifacts. That seem to surface consistently over the years.
Yeah.
In 1877, a polished iron-nickel alloy metal block was found embedded in a Miocene coal seam located in a mine high in the Austrian Alps. This square prism object measured about 2 3/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches by 2 inches, and had a machined groove around its periphery, with two faces perfectly rounded at its corners.
Uh-huh.
And the object was later featured in an 1885 issue of the journal Nature, a very prestigious journal, and put on display in the Salzburg Museum until it was misplaced and disappeared around 1910.
Oh, I wonder what happened to it.
Well, that's just it. No one knows. I have, some speculative hunches. It became a difficult object to actually describe to people by the scientific community. So normally, I'm not saying that's what happened here, but normally objects of that nature tend to find their way into the deepest crevices of the basement of museums and storage rooms and so forth. Again, that's speculation, and I choose not to speculate. But one thing about this block, its recorded mass should have been more than twice what it was if it was solid. And although this block has been discussed by some authors in the past, it has never been mentioned or calculated out, in my case, that the object was not solid. Its 785-gram weight suggests a hollow or chambered interior, perhaps housing more complex items.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to tie that together with some other of the more tangible anomalous artifacts that we'll discuss. By the way, a very similar steel block was also found in an Austrian foundry in 1885. This is a different block. It was partially encased in a coal lump and was found very candidly by the foundry owner's son as he passed by this big chute of coal. He noticed this strange object, embedded in the coal lump, and it was a very, very similar a block to the one I just mentioned. It was just slightly smaller. It was about 2 5/8 inch by 2 5/8 inch by about 1.85 inch in length, and it also displayed the same machined groove with two opposite faces rounded. Not surprisingly, it too ended up going missing after it was put on display in the Linz Museum.
Uh-huh.
The article obviously was of artificial origin. It was produced by some intelligent being. But both blocks were found in coal veins from the Miocene strata of the Tertiary coal period, which makes it between 12 and 26 million years old. Steel mills, tool shops, and skilled machinists did not exist millions of years ago, at least not on planet Earth.
Uh-huh.
Now,
we found, though, anything that doesn't fit the classification, of the scientists and fit what their theories, it's an anomaly, so they just don't include it.
Well, so often that's the case, Dolores. Yep. Now, kind of a similar, I shouldn't even say a similar object. Another anomalous artifact was found in Massachusetts in 1851. It was a bell-shaped cone that was found embedded in solid granite after blasting operations had split the stone. It also was of artificial construction from a metal alloy, and it measured about 6.5 inches at its base, tapering to 2.5 inches at the top of its 4.5 inch height. And over and above that cone, there have been gold threads, extruded gold threads, found embedded in solid stone by workers cutting in in England, a quarry. That too came from the Miocene stratum that formed 12 to 26 million years ago. And similar finds were found in tertiary coal seams, where a manufactured gold chain was embedded in a Pennsylvania coal deposit, with another 10-inch long gold chain found in 1891, I believe.
Yeah.
Obviously, both were made before the coal deposit, making them, millions of years old. These types of anomalous artifacts may somehow be connected. Consider that the machine metal cubes that were found in Europe, in Austria, may have been components of a detachable sensor pack, or possibly individualized targeting devices. Again, this is purely speculative, but what were these items for? Is always a big question. Their hollow or chambered interior construction tends to support the possibility that other instrumentation may have been housed within the blocks, and hence their intended purpose may have been to gather and analyze mineral deposits or soil samples, sent here as landers, probes, sensors, whatever. The cone-shaped chalice that was embedded in the Massachusetts granite may have been a portion of an outer casing, perhaps a heat shield for a space probe or sensor, whatever, for those blocks. The anomalous gold thread may have been, part of the wiring within such an extraterrestrial probe, and used for various electronic packages, the power pack, and so forth for the internal componentry. The manufactured gold chains may have been grounding straps or power cords.
It's a shame that they disappeared, because with our technology today, I don't know if we could X-ray metal, but I think we could certainly find out if it was hollow and there was anything inside of it.
Oh, there's no question that it was hollow because of its density. Now,
in our technology today, though, we might have been able to find a lot more.
No question about that, Dolores. Much would be available to us in the form of additional information today.
Yeah.
So it's disappointing that such valuable artifacts simply disappear.
Well, I also remember in the book that you talked about David Hatcher Childress, and I've had him on my show. He's a good friend of mine, and I mentioned what you said, about how there was a lot of artifacts found in the Grand Canyon. I believe that's what it was, and you said they had disappeared into the Smithsonian Institute somewhere.
That is also correct. That was from early 1900s. From memory, it was around 1909, if I'm not mistaken. Archaeological dig in the Grand Canyon, and the Egyptian artifacts that were found with that expedition simply disappeared and never talked about again. And numerous other anomalous artifacts have been deliberately mislabeled, hidden, ignored, suppressed, undervalued, or discarded as extraneous. And one of the common traits museums tend to do with anomalous artifacts that defy true explanation. They label them as toys or religious artifacts. And hence, no one knew what possibly these particular articles could have been used for because it was in their religious practice, which we don't understand. You know, it's passing off scientific research for nonsense. And David Hatcher Childress, the prolific author of the Lost Cities book series, also has reported on other cases that the Smithsonian Institute apparently also lost. And similar conclusions were claimed by French scientist Jacques Bergier, who was born in Russia as Yakov Bergaier. He reported that the vaults of the Smithsonian Institution are also full of crates containing amazing objects that no one is now studying. He also claimed that the situation existed in other museums. I personally contend that many marvelous relics remain in storage, like I said, at museums or similar institutional agencies, simply because they do not fit with the prevailing beliefs.
Yeah.
Yet these relics may be more important than many of the items that are actually on display at the museums. It's sad.
But, you know, I remember there was the stories, too, I think they're in your book, about, was it Egypt or somewhere where they found these little, very small things that look like airplanes or like jets?
As a matter of fact, that's exactly the case. There was one found in 1898 at Saqqara, and it was cataloged by the Cairo Museum as item number 6347, which identified it as a bird.
A bird.
But that model plane, which dated to about 2000 BC, along with several others, very, very similar models, were later re-examined in 1969. And they all incorporated a correct dihedral angle of wing attachment with aerodynamically designed proportions that were deemed ideal for flight, and yet these were birds. You know, which is ludicrous.
It's ridiculous. But the ones I've seen look like jets, but they could also be said to look like spaceships too.
Well, there was a delta wing, a gold trinket. That was a South American artifact that literally, if it was blown up, to full size, would have been a very, very similar design to our Delta ships, our Delta craft, a Delta wing craft. And, it's all of these things seem to be deliberately ignored because they do not fit with the conventional paradigm, explaining our past and
our history, the way they perceive our history.
Exactly, Dolores. Exactly.
But you probably know also, I think, wasn't it somewhere in Egypt? I don't think it was at a pyramid. It was one of the tombs where they had the carvings above the door that looked like helicopters, jets, submarines. There was a whole series of them. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yes. That was at Abydos, and some of the hieroglyphics, along with the petroglyph images, have never been able to be deciphered. That's some of the oldest hieroglyphics known in Egypt, and there are images, engraved, carved in stone that are truly depictions of modern Apache helicopter aircraft. And also, if those familiar with, as everyone is, with the Star Wars movies, the land speeders of Star Wars fame. it's uncanny how aircraft is a somewhat again common depiction in ancient times, and these are not crude drawings or crude carvings. These are accurate depictions of more modern day craft.
They're very exact, the ones I've seen.
Very much so, Dolores.
But their explanation for them doesn't make any sense.
Precisely.
Looking at the obvious, what it looks like, they describe it as something totally different.
Or they completely ignore it.
Yeah.
And more and more, that seems to be the way that they choose to deal with such anomalous artifacts. It's rather disheartening. Along that same line, there are artifacts that can't be so well hidden, and those are the megalithic structures from ancient times. And
I've been to several of these. You can't very well hide them, but they
precisely the case.
But they still give different explanations for them. But go ahead with that line. Okay.
With the megalithic structures?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, we can look at obviously Egypt to start with, and the Khafre pyramid, the middle pyramid of the three Giza pyramids, are one of those structures that definitely it was built in different phases. And it appears as though its first several base courses of megalithic stone are much predate the later completion of the middle pyramid, and there are indications that perhaps it was even started before the Great Flood of 10,500 BC, and it was now the middle pyramid has the Valley Temple and Sphinx Temple, and the Sphinx sitting in front of it. And all of those, the Sphinx Temple, and Valley Temple, also show a much greater age for construction than what Egyptologists give it. Now, another similar construction from more ancient times is the Osirian, also in Abydos. As a matter of fact, we were just talking about the anomalous carvings from Abydos. The Osirian is located in Abydos, and this particular phenomenal temple is incorrectly thought to have been a lower level segment of the Seti I temple, since it was situated below into the rear of that much younger structure, which was known to have been built during the time of Seti I, around 1300 BC. But definitely the Osirian was much older, much earlier in its construction. It has the largest megalithic limestone and granite blocks found throughout throughout Egypt. The moat that surrounded the central mezzanine was enclosed by a 20-foot thick rectangular wall of red sandstone, and it was cut and fitted in the distinctive polygonal shape of other ancient edifices, where they just fall together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. This was often done for earthquake proofing, so to speak. If there were tremblers, tectonic plate movements, and so forth, the rocks might shift and rumble a little bit, but because of their interlocking nature of their polygonal shapes, they would all fall back into place and reseat, so to speak.
I've been to Cusco. There they have the cities, that are built with the rocks that are just molded together.
Exactly.
And the shape fit together, and they said they're so tight, no cement, and you can't even put a credit card between them. But when I was in Cusco, they they had the custom back in the early days of many temples. When the Christians came along, they would build a cathedral or a church over at the temples to hide them. But in Cusco, they didn't destroy the temple, but they built their church around it. But they had an earthquake there, I believe it was in the 1950s, destroyed the church. And at that time, they saw the temple was inside of it. They didn't even know it was there, the people nowadays. But that temple survived where everything else just was destroyed. And it was built like that, with the rocks that were all just molded together. It was fantastic.
The structures in South America are very similar, the polygonal shapes.
Yeah.
And the construction methods are very, very similar to the what are seen in the oldest phases of the Egyptian constructions. And
I have a theory they were all done about the same time period, really, all over the world.
I do agree. I do agree. One common tie with all of those structures, the South American and the oldest Egyptian structures, they're all devoid of any inscriptions or ornamentation. And that's unheard of in later dynastic Egypt, where pharaohs signed everything. Everything was done in the honor of the pharaoh at the time.
Yeah.
So, my gosh, flower pots, walking sticks, I don't care what it was in Egypt, they were engraved. They always had, some script, some writing on them. And yet these oldest structures are devoid of any of those inscriptions, dedications. It's kind of a common tie. In other words, whoever built those earliest, oldest structures had no desire to be lauded, to be worshipped, to be praised. The structures were built obviously for some purpose, which we really don't know even to this day. Their true purpose. They were not tombs in the case of pyramids. There's never been a human body found in a tomb. In a pyramid, excuse me.
They definitely were not tombs in the pyramids.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I agree with you on all of those things. That's why I published your book, because I agreed with everything in there. But,
well, I appreciate that.
And I always, when somebody knows what they're talking about too. But let's see, we've got some more time here. Was there something else, another part of that you wanted to bring out? We talked about
with the exception of some of the megalithic construction sites, most of the anomalous artifacts are single or standalone items. And what I mean by that is no other relics are found within the site. Virtually, their sites are devoid of any indication of a cultural development, let alone an advanced society that would be capable of producing these anomalous artifacts.
Uh-huh.
So a possible lost civilization can be eliminated as their source, since there's no trace of a pre-culture buildup leading to such an advanced society, or of a later society itself that would have produced those articles. Rather, such lone artifacts, to me at least, would indicate perhaps a dropped item by a temporary visitor, or perhaps components of a probe or data collecting sensor sent to our planet, as we previously discussed, Dolores.
Yeah, so like an explorer of some kind.
Exactly, and perhaps they had to leave quickly. They dropped some of their equipment, or the equipment was expendable, and rather than taking that added weight back with them, or whatever the case, we'll just leave it here. It's served its purpose. And but there's no indication of a culture prior or extant at the time of the
the artifacts that would indicate they were built here on Earth or manufactured on Earth. Matter of fact, the more likely scenario finds otherworldly beings occupying our planet, perhaps as temporary lodging while their home planet purged, effects from a planetary cataclysm or whatever, or even an unsuccessful attempt at permanent colonization of Earth by alien beings. Again, purely speculative, but it's a temporary type visitation, that's indicated by these articles.
I know in your book you go way, way back, to the very beginning and beyond, to bring this forward about all of the speculation, but a lot of it is based on research and fact, dealing with the seeding and the beginning of Earth, when people were first put here, and then bring it forward. You go into a lot about that because, I also write about the fact that there is no missing link. They have never found one. That everything evolved so fast that it just jumped whole generations. And you go back to a lot of that also.
And I completely agree with your statement, Dolores.
Okay. I might be skipping around, but go ahead. Go ahead. I think you came to the same theories that I have, anyway.
Well, I agree that there's when it comes to a missing link, I don't see a missing link at all. We have a very different emerging species as humans on this planet than what conventional theories seem to dictate. It just doesn't quite make sense with the geological and anthropological evidence and record that exists. And in speaking of this temporary type visitation by extraterrestrials, if that be the case, there are a number of nails that were also found embedded in rock or coal seams, coal lumps, etc. And nails are not used for megalithic stone construction, but they are used for wood construction. And these nails that go back to, again, perhaps 26 million years ago, would, to me, indicate temporary structures put together using wood in nails, for, again, temporary lodging,
and that way
shelter or whatever.
Yeah, that way the wood would have deteriorated over the years.
Precisely. Yep.
Yeah.
And
that would all plant materials would turn into coal anyway.
Exactly. I was just going to say the ferns would bury the rusty nails then after the wood deteriorated, and with heat, pressure, and many millions of years, we have our tertiary coal seams from the ferns. So it's now again, all of these anomalous artifacts are only supportive evidence suggesting otherworldly intervention during Earth's ancient past. But the trilogy is much more than a review of out-of-place anthropological, geological, and archaeological relics.
I know you're saying that it is just an assumption, but I think you really prove your case very well. As it in the first book, it has a lot about artifacts and about the history of man on down. Then I've just finished reading the second book. That one, you were amazing with me because you have found records that, like, just one of a kind.
I appreciate that. It was. I'm smiling as you say that, Dolores, because I was very fortunate to stumble across some of those references, some of those ancient texts that no one, and I mean no one, has found.
I know, that's what impressed me, because some of these, they were just one tablet in existence. And these are much, much older than the ones that Zacharias Sitchin has written about. His work kept more up into the Sumerian times, but you went back really to the beginning of the planet with some of the things you have found, the history.
Absolutely.
And I'd never heard of some of these references at all. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because this will be the second book, which is Legacy. What's the name of it? Legacy?
Legacy of the Elder Gods.
Legacy of the Elder Gods.
Right.
And I know someone emailed us not very long ago and said, well, you said you're doing a second book. I can't imagine what's in it. There was so much in the first one.
Again, I appreciate that. My intent...
See, that's what I mean. You found things that I'd never heard of before. But yet, mentioned some of these references that they're just like one of a kind that have never been written about before.
Well, they're excerpts in much later texts of lost ancient manuscripts, and right offhand, I don't have any of my notes and I can't think of any.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was there's so much information, it'd be impossible to keep it all in your head.
I could not agree more with that. If anyone actually took the time to look at the reference pages in all three of the volumes, it takes up a goodly portion of the book.
I know you did say that you wanted to write all three books before you found a publisher, didn't you?
That is also correct, Dolores. It was extremely important to me to be consistent throughout all the volumes, and other authors have not done that in that same manner, and there are some inconsistencies from one volume to another in some cases, and I wanted to try to avoid that in my particular case. Plus, I'm a stickler for facts and consistency and uniformity, so that was another reason. The first volume, just to make a point, the first volume, undoubtedly, I went overboard because my intent of the first volume was to make it the Bible, the encyclopedia, to throw out every aspect associated with the ancient astronaut theory, and give as much detail as possible in a condensed basis to make sense and to offer the supportive evidence and suggestive evidence of my theory, the Elder Gods theory that I came up with, and hence the second volume then goes into more detail in some of the in specific areas that is not covered in the first, since the first is again kind of the encyclopedia. It's a little bit of everything in it, in an organized and orderly fashion, of course, as an engineer would.
Naturally, that's why you would do it that way. But in the second volume too, you've come up with the same theories that I have, like about the planet that was destroyed, and this became the asteroid belt, and that it did destroy the atmosphere on Mars. All of this I've written about in my own books, and you talk about for the survivors, came. That's what I liked about it, because even though we come from different directions, we have found the same information, about the asteroid and what happened with that.
There's a great deal of commonality between our writings, Dolores.
Yeah.
One thing that I should clarify for your listeners, speaking of the outer planet, we are talking two different species of otherworldly beings that, according to my theory, the Elder Gods theory, visited Earth in ancient times and greatly affected Earth's development and humanity's ancestry. And one species would be the Elder Gods that I refer to, the ancient ones that came from.
I called them the
archaic ones.
The archaic ones, but it's the same thing.
Exactly. And these are the true extraterrestrials, the true aliens to our world. The second species of extraterrestrials came from within our own solar system, where life first started within our solar system on an outer planet.
Yes.
And very candidly, there just simply is insufficient evidence to show or prove which outer planet is the homeworld of this solar system, a human-like species that I talk about in the Elder Gods, in the Elder Gods theory.
Yeah.
And the most likely, the two best candidates are Mars and Meldick. Meldick being the planet that once occupied the fifth orbit from the sun, which is now occupied by the asteroid belt.
Yeah.
And obviously it was destroyed at some ancient time, in the remote past. By all indications, that was around 700,000 BC. Certainly in that time range. And again, that kind of eliminates the 3000 BC. It again, it's not meant as a specific year that the planet exploded, but more of a time frame. It wasn't 10 million years ago. It wasn't 3,000 years ago. It was around 700,000 BC. Okay. And this is highly detailed in the book.
Volume. Don, I'm watching the clock. The one thing I do want to tell the listeners, we are having our third Transformation Conference, and it's going to be held in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And this is coming up on June 13th to the 15th, that weekend. And Don Schorn is going to be one of our speakers, and he's going to be elaborating a lot more on this. And, of course, there'll be questions and answers. But if you want more information about our conference, go to our website, ozarkmt.com, and find out more about it. But this is June the 13th to the 15th, and it's going to be in Fayetteville, Arkansas at the Clarion Inn. But now, Don, if anybody wants to contact you, is there a way they can get a hold of you?
Yes. Probably the best bet, Dolores, would be through Ozark Mountain Publishing. And that shows, as a matter of fact, on your website as the contact information. And then, of course, that can be forwarded from there.
If anybody emails and just says it's for you, then we will forward it.
Okay. And hopefully at some later date, I will be, establishing a better, more direct means of contacting the author. But for right now, that would be the best bet for any of your listeners.
All right, but it's Don Schorn, Schorn, and the name of the book is The Elder Gods of Antiquity, and this is the first volume of the three set, and it is really getting very good reports from the readers. They keep contacting us, and they really like it, and they're looking forward to the second volume. But if anyone wants to come and hear Don, come to the conference in June in Fayetteville, and you'll get to meet him and all the other authors we're going to have. Okay, well, we're coming down to the end now, and Don, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Dolores, for having me. It's been my pleasure. I know I'm long-winded. I apologize for for going on and on, but I am looking forward to the Transformation Conference. In fact, I'll be there. My presentation will be on Sunday, June 15th, in the morning, and very, very much looking forward to that.
Okay. No, you did just fine, but I want to thank you. And so now I'm saying good night to everyone. And next week I'm going to be in Atlanta, so they're going to use a show out of the archives. But good night, everybody.
Thanks again, Dolores. Bye-bye.
Okay.
If you enjoyed the show, check out more of our other videos and be sure to subscribe and click the like button. Thank you for listening to the Metaphysical Hour with Dolores Cannon.